In this podcast, we are going to look at the Bikini Bottom Genetics review worksheet that you guys were given this past week. I know on Friday we did go through a little bit of number 4 in most classes, but we didn't get to spend as much time on it as I would like, and honestly as much time as many of you need. So with this podcast, I'm going to go through how to successfully solve this problem, go step by step and kind of walk you through it, and just explain how to do it and then explain what the problem means. So hopefully when you're working this weekend on problems 5, 6, and 7 on the back of this handout, it'll be a little bit easier for you to solve. So if you don't already have your worksheet out, please go ahead and take it out and look at number 4. Number 4 says, SpongeBob SquarePants recently met Sponge Susie Roundpants at the Bikini Bottom dance-off. SpongeBob is heterozygous for his square shape, but Sponge Susie is homozygous round. Now, if you'll remember from this past week, we talked about heterozygous and homozygous. Heterozygous means that it has 2 different alleles. It's going to show one dominant allele and one recessive allele. In homozygous, you're going to have the same 2 alleles, and they're either both going to be dominant or they're both going to be recessive. I'm going to highlight some of the important information in this problem just to kind of help me keep track of the information. So the first thing I'm going to highlight is the term heterozygous. And we remember, like we just talked about, heterozygous means different alleles. Because we are going to see one dominant allele and one recessive allele, you're going to actually be seeing the dominant trait. In this problem, it says that SpongeBob is heterozygous for his square shape. That tells me that the dominant trait is going to be the square. If we keep reading, it says Sponge Susie is homozygous round. And again, homozygous means that it's 2 of the same alleles. We know from before reading that the dominant trait is the square. So if Sponge Susie isn't showing the square trait, then we know she has to be showing the recessive. Because of this, we know that Sponge Susie is going to have 2 lowercase letters. Again, the way that I figured this out was because I know that homozygous means same alleles. I also know that heterozygous means different alleles. When you have 2 different alleles, one is dominant, one is recessive, you're always going to see that dominant trait because that dominant trait is going to dominate and be stronger than the recessive trait. So SpongeBob, again, is showing the dominant trait, and Sponge Susie is showing the recessive trait. What I would suggest you do is to just make some notes on the side of your handout. This way you can kind of keep track of your thinking and just make sense of what you just read. From my reading, I know that the dominant trait is going to be that square shape, while the recessive is going to be the round shape. So on the side of my paper, I'm just going to make a note that the dominant allele, that capital, and you can pick any letter you want. I'm going to stick with the S's just because we're talking about shape, and the dominant trait is also that square. So on the side, I've got a capital S is going to equal a square, while the recessive trait, or the little s, is going to be the round shape. So again, you can pick any letters you want. It really doesn't matter what you're picking, just as long as you can keep track of the phenotypes or those traits that go with it. On the other side of your paper, and this I would really like for you to get in the habit of doing because it will help you better solve these problems, is to write down the genotypes for both of the parents. So I'm going to start with SpongeBob. He's going to be parent 1, and the reason why I picked him as parent 1, honestly, is because I read about him first in the problem. So on this side, I've got parent 1. Now look back with me at your word problem, and it says that SpongeBob is heterozygous. And we said that heterozygous means two different alleles. So using the letters that I've already picked, the S's, I'm going to write his genotype on the side of my paper. So again, SpongeBob is heterozygous, which means two different alleles. So I'm going to write a capital S or a big S, and I'm going to make a little s. Okay? Then if I keep reading, it talks about Sponge Susie. Sponge Susie is homozygous round or homozygous recessive. We know that parent 2, Susie, is homozygous, which means two of the same alleles. We also know she's recessive, so I know that she's going to be two of the little s's. Now that I have the phenotypes and the genotypes for both parents, I'm going to take those genotypes and I'm going to transfer them to my Punnett square. Now, looking at my Punnett square over here to the left on your handout, okay, I will be putting parent 1 at the top. This is just the steps that I take. It doesn't matter which parent you put on the top or on the side. It's just easier for me to remember to put parent 1 on the top, but it's really up to you. So parent 1 is SpongeBob, and he's showing that heterozygous genotype. So at the top of my square, over the first column, I'm going to put that capital S. Okay. Then I'm going to take the second allele in that genotype and put it in the second column. You only want one allele above each of the columns. Now I'm going to take Susie, who's that homozygous recessive, and I'm going to put her genotypes on the side. Again, you only want one allele per, in this case, per row. So now I have the parents on the outside. The Punnett square is meant to show you the possible outcomes of a trait for one of their offspring. I know a lot of the time we like to think that each of these boxes represents one child, and that's not how it works. It's representing outcomes or probability. With my parents on the outside, I can start moving these alleles down to see what my probabilities are going to start looking like. So the way that I do it is just I have this little way of remembering what exactly to do, and that is whatever's at the top, what's up must come down. And I always like to put my dominant alleles on the left-hand side or on the outside. So what's up must come down. The next part of my little saying is what's left must come over. So now I'm going to bring over these smaller letters or the genotype for the mom. So now I have brought everything over. What I want you to think about now that we're talking probabilities again is that the entire Punnett square as a whole represents 100%. If SpongeBob and Sponge Susie were to have a kid, they're going to have a 100% chance of inheriting the trait for shape. Now the question is, what's their chances of getting either the dominant trait or the recessive trait? What I want you to think is if we divide the entire square, or that entire chance of getting the trait, into 4, we have a 25% for each box. Looking at part B, for 4B, it says, what is the percentage of the sponge child being a square shape? And we have to think again, like we have over here, the capital letter is going to represent the square shape. So if I look at my Punnett square, I see that there's a capital letter in 2 of the boxes. If you remember to what I said in class and before in this podcast, if you have at least one capital letter, you're going to see that dominant trait. Think about, if we have a big bully in school and you're a smaller kid, if that big bully is present, the bully is going to technically win. So what I want you to think with this is if there's at least one capital letter, you're going to see that dominant trait. So if I count here how many boxes I have with capital letters, I'm going to count 1, 2. If each box represents 25%, I'm going to add 25% from here and 25% from here. That's going to tell me that there is a 50% chance that SpongeBob and Sponge Susie's kid is going to have that square shape. Part C is asking about the percentage of them having a kid with a round shape. And remember from our reading before, round is the recessive. The only time you are ever going to see that recessive trait is if there are 2 of the lowercase letters. And so if I refer over here to my Punnett square, I'm going to see that I have this box here and this box here with 2 of the lowercase letters. 2 of these boxes are showing a homozygous recessive trait. So again, if each square represents 25%, I have 25% here plus 25% there, and that's going to give me a 50% chance of having a sponge kid with a round shape. So they have a 50-50 chance of getting either a square or a round shape. I hope that this podcast was helpful and that you have a better understanding of how to solve Punnett square problems. If you're still having trouble and this podcast has not helped you at all, we will be going through this again on Monday and going over those additional problems on the back. So if you're confused, just do the best that you can, and again, we will talk about this on Tuesday. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we will see you on Tuesday.